Secret Circle.
Welcome to the Secret Circle with me, Dr. Luke Deckard, the podcast where I chat with authors, filmmakers, musicians, and more about the art of their craft and let you in on some of their secrets. Today's guest is actor Stephanie Czajkowski. She's acted in film, TV, on stage, including shows like DC's Doom Patrol, Star Trek Picard Season 3, and much more. And today we're going to let you in on some of her secrets. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to have you on. We've chatted before on a different podcast that's lovingly archived on YouTube for those who want to go back and listen to it. But I'm happy to have you on the this new podcast. And what I like to do with the first question is whether I have like a writer on or an actor or whatever. If it's a writer, I tend to ask why do they write. But I know you mostly as an actor, so I want to know the philosophical question of why do you act? Why do you want to be or need to be? What is that? Why do you act?
I really, really cherish the community, whether it's film or television or theater, the act of coming together in community to tell story, to tell human story, and to tell story and talk about things that we out in the world often brush over. That is the reason I do it. It's the reason. It has changed as the years have gone. Like as the years have gone on, I have different reasons for wanting to do it. But at the root of it is there is something that happens in that collective. It's slightly different on stage because there's audience giving feedback or whatever. But there's just a magic there that I can't fully explain. That feels just bigger than you.
I like that.
Yeah.
When you say brush over, like there's things that we kind of brush over, like what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that, I think the last Doom, I worked on Doom Patrol, and to that point, like I think that writers, especially for film and television, if studios will allow it, the question we always ask is why today? Like, why is this day different than any other? Like, because every story we're telling via, whether it's theater, whether it's film, is about how this day is different than something else. We're always talking about changes in people's lives. And often they're big. Sometimes they're small, but in life, they tend to be gradual as opposed to like giant event, right? We always talk about the giant event.
Yeah.
But I also think, although I feel like we're getting better at talking about hard things, we in general, as a population, like to brush the surface of very, very deep things. We don't talk about death well. We don't talk about sickness well. We specifically don't talk about death well.
Yeah.
We're getting better at talking about mental health. But, it's destigmatizing things that are hard subjects to talk about. And I think in film and television and stuff, we want things to be, we've traditionally tied everything out in a neat bow all the time, that it also lends itself to people believing their life should be tied up in these neat bows,
Yeah. That's really funny. Not funny in a haha way, funny in an interesting way. But like when I think about, like, maybe it's kind of a silly example, but back in the day, and when you're like on the dating scene, right?
Yeah.
And you're meeting people and stuff, and there's always people with these like Disney ideas of what relationships and love games. So it's interesting you talk about how like this that particular effect that stories have in I guess kind of a negative way towards culture. But what's something that you've been in that you think is like this was a really great honest way of talking about a particular subject?
I really think that, and I'm very sad that it just ended. I thought that Doom Patrol did a really, really good job at starting to explore mental health and trauma in a way that didn't feel like it was soapboxing.
Yeah.
Because I think that so often we want to talk about hard subjects, and what people will do is they'll get on their soapbox and they'll be like, blah, 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 blah. And as soon as you are proselytizing to someone, or specifically if you're telling something that they don't register with, they will automatically turn you off. And I think that Doom Patrol they were very deft at threading the needle of telling this story through these characters that were removed to give people space to allow them to affect them without thinking like, oh, they're trying to compare me. You know what I mean? It kind of, because there was a sense of fantasy there, in particular when it first came out, Danny on the Street, a street that was alive, that was really, it was a non-binary creature. Was a non-binary creature when we were really starting to talk about what is sex, what is gender, or not what is sex, but what is gender identity,
right?
Also, why the fuck does it matter? But and really start to have those conversations, but have them in a way, or presented in a way that I feel like anyone can watch it and not be offended by it. And because it doesn't trigger, then it opens up the opportunity for conversation.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an interesting thing. The idea of story opening up conversation, because I'm a big fan of that. I feel that's what stories should accomplish. And being quite plugged into the pop culture scene, and seeing what's going on, it is interesting sometimes in a frustrating kind of way, seeing some of the conversations that are being had, almost as if it's almost like both, like there are two sides and both sides aren't quite connected. Yeah, they're not getting each other, and it's causing frustration out there. Because you're recently in Star Trek Picard, which Star Trek is known for its satire and allegory and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's ham-fisted, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's beautifully done. It's mixed, but there's an interesting sort of, sometimes you see this interesting pushback of certain individuals who look at maybe more modern stuff and automatically don't want to take to it for various reasons. But then I also think there's a responsibility on the writing side, on the writers in the show, and the creators of the show, or if it's a writer of a book or of a comic book, whatever. The creators behind that also, I think, have a responsibility to sort of maybe see that and recognize that, and try to understand what's going on, and why that tension is there.
I think you have to honor, I think I have 2 points when it comes to large franchises, is, and you see this, I think you see it a lot more in Star Wars, where people are like, God damn it, they get really mad. But you need to know where you've come from. You need to respect the history of it. And I think fans react because they feel that someone is not respecting what is already established. Like I think I played woohoo in between or after Star Trek and Picard, or Picard and Doom Patrol. I was lucky enough to be on an episode of Young Rock, and I played China the wrestler. And in playing, you see it in playing real people, in trying to find the essence, but also making sure they're not a caricature of really honoring the legacy that has been left. And I think that when we start to talk about franchise and we start to talk about fans, I feel fans in particular are very vocal when they feel that the history that people are just being like, well, fuck the history, let's move on. And I think we see that in our life. I think we see that absolutely in the world as well, because, to the other point of having conversation, we're not having conversation to learn. We are, I think, not even at a crux, but this has been happening for a while. People are trying to win. They're not trying to understand. They are trying to win. And if both parts are trying to win, you're never going to have understanding, because it's just about scoring points. And it's exhausting, and it's
definitely,
and it happen. I mean, it's happening right now with the SAG contract. It is, and when you look at history, honoring history. It's, it's generational. And it to me, it's always seems, because I've always gotten along pretty adeptly with people older than me. I find them very interesting.
Mm.
But I just find them interesting because I am interested in how people become who they are. What are the
Mm.
stories? And recently I'm like, what are the stories I tell? Like, what are the stories I tell myself? What is who I've become?
Mm.
What are the stories in my life that I believe about myself? Like those, people go into relationships expecting a Prince Charming thing. What are the things that make up who I've become, and what don't fit me anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I think we so often, and I'm trying to get better at this because it's very difficult
Mm.
to really take a beat
Mm.
and try to see where someone else is coming from. I'm getting better at it, but
Mm.
it is that like old, To Kill a Mockingbird, walk around in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
But it's never, it's now it feels like it's easier to just be accusatory. Social media has made nuance, and the fact that you can hold two things to be like two things can
Yeah.
be true at the same time.
Yes.
We're in a place where it's amazing because it connects us,
Yeah.
but what gets likes and what people are going for is, you know, is fighting in fear get a lot of follows.
They do.
They really
They
do.
do. Yeah. It's nuts. It's yeah, fighting in fear and just general like sadness, anything
Yeah,
that's a bit sad. Like I remember a long time ago, one of the it's silly, but like one of my most engaged with posts was actually one that was, I didn't actually think it was going to get that much attention. I said something about quite vague about kind of a personal thing that had happened to me and my wife, and we didn't really go into detail about it.
right.
Um, and for some reason, just that one just like shot up in likes and retweet. And I'm just like, this is weird. Like the positive stuff I send out like almost gets like it's like tumbleweeds. But if it's
Yeah,
something that's sad or mean or controversial, you do see that on social media, and it does it's frustrating that is the stuff that has the most kind of currency with those. And I like what you were saying about taking a beat, and I
yeah,
think more of us need to do that. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love firing from the hip. I do it
oh,
all the time.
yeah,
But, taking that moment to stop me like, well, why is this happening? Why is this person saying this? What is the background behind everything that's going on? Is
yeah,
there something that we can actually stop and learn from what this person is saying, rather than this whole kind of gotcha Michael Moore gotcha moments?
yeah,
It's just like, we don't need it. We don't need it.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up in a household like that, and it's funny because
Yeah.
I fall into that trap. My father was very much like that. My
Mm.
mother not so much, but I have a sibling who is, and we will trigger the fuck out of each other. Like super hurtful. Like and as I've
Yeah.
gotten older, I'm recognizing the pattern,
Yep.
and I'm also learning how to. My best way about it is because I've realized it, and I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think they have. I
Mm.
think they just think like, no, no, like so. My only way of avoiding it is just to avoid it. And
Right.
it was so
Get
funny.
that.
I remember showing up at their house one time and walking in and being like, "Oh, fuck," and you could just feel it. Like,
Yeah.
they were loaded for bear, and I was like, "I'm gonna go to the grocery store," and my husband we had just driven, and my husband had driven. I'm like, "You wanna come with me?" And he didn't. And it was the first time he absorbed, like, kind of the toxic behavior that has been inherited by my family, by my in my sub in how we communicate.
Yeah.
And to his credit, I would have been there like, "Fuck you," but like, it would have been burn bridge, whatever. He, to his credit, because he did not grow up like that, he is also older, he is also Canadian, literally de-escalated the situation and was
Interesting.
like and literally just went, "Are you okay, man?" Because I think a lot of that comes from people not being seen, and they wanna be
Mm.
seen and they wanna be heard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but at the same time, it has traumatized him, like and it really made me realize, because I got to see it through someone else's, purview Oh, yeah. That shit's bad, dude. Like, I knew
Yeah.
it. And so now I'm also really cognizant in when something, I've been saying more and more on the interwebs on the is that two things can be true at the same time because I
Mhm.
think we've gotten away from the idea that you can hold space for two things. You don't have to choose a side. Like
Yes.
there's a lot of, and
Yes.
that's what's hard about being human is
Yeah.
it is easier to be black or white.
Yeah.
Religion is based on that. Like I feel like people love religion, A, because of community, but also rules make people feel safe. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they
Mm.
just feel safe.
Yeah.
Um, but I just, and also the fact that we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Like,
Yeah.
and in my personal story, I remember, it's I have experienced my life even while having siblings, and if you ask them the same question, their take on it will be different.
Oh my
You know
god,
what I
that's
mean?
so right. Oh my yes, well, it was last year, I think my sister came to visit, and she was recalling things, and I'm like,
What?
"That's
Yeah,
not how it happened at
yeah,
all." Like, I
yeah.
totally, totally relate to that. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's just like I remember years ago, an ex-boyfriend who was a good friend of mine
Mm,
talking to his older sister, talking about their upbringing in like a very, very rural town in Iowa
mm,
and how they talk about it and
mm.
how they remember it and experience it were like polar. They're still family, they get along really well,
Yeah,
but their story of their how they tell their story of their upbringing completely different,
yeah.
completely different.
Yeah. Is it also like maybe like I don't know if it's the same way with you as it is with me and my sibling. Is their perception of you? Does it feel like they're like they even get who you are, or do they, or is their idea of you just entirely kind of that like their version, but not really who you are? Does that make
I
sense?
think yes, I think it's changed. I have
Mm,
I have 2 siblings,
yeah.
one is 2 years younger and one is 9 years younger, and
Mm,
I went through when the 2 years younger and I when we grew up, my parents got a divorce when I was in high school,
mm,
and, there's 2 boys in my family, I'm the oldest, and the younger brother and I, while we were living in Wisconsin, were very, very close growing up.
mm,
When we moved to Illinois, and it was the first time we went from Catholic school to private or public school, and
right.
so we were in separate schools, and so our experience was very different. Like, I went to junior high where it was like high school, like, it was super cool. Like, I went from a class of 23 to a class of 105 where you went
Wow.
to different
Yeah.
classes, like, it was a bit of a culture shock, but I was a little bit better at adapting.
Mm,
He had a really hard time. My youngest brother mostly grew up there, and my youngest brother and I are the ones who trigger each other. We're very much like my father. My
uh,
brother is like my dad. And when my parents got a divorce, my brother stayed with my dad and I went with my mom.
uh,
Um, and so as a result, like two of us grew up with my brother, my father, and my mother until we moved to Illinois. And then the youngest brother mostly knows my parents as not being together.
mm,
And when my youngest brother was younger, he would come out like, and we were very similar. And it was very much a case of like, look at my younger brother, blah, blah. Um, I, for the most part, I think I've been when it comes to like politics stuff, I'm an actor,
mm,
right? I went to lit school in, Greenwich Village. My going to school, they have no idea about. Like, I don't think they understand. And my father had his story that he needed to tell about why my parents got divorced.
mm,
So we had like, he and I had a disintegrating relationship that had to be rebuilt.
mm,
But as we've gotten older, I find, especially now, my youngest brother is the brother who, like, fisticuffs, is since then, both my parents have died. He has become a police officer. He, lived as a police officer through Black Lives Matter.
mm,
I and my husband, who is Canadian, I think he views us, and there was a point where he became a cop because he was an electrician, which is a
mm.
really good fucking job.
Yeah.
That I was like, "Hey, don't become a cop."
Mm,
Not because
mm,
it's not an honorable profession, but
yeah.
it is going to change who you are. It is
Yeah.
going to change your humanity. As someone who loves people,
Yeah.
you are going to not like them because you are going to see them at your worst because they're not going to be happy to see you.
Yeah.
And I say that very equanimously, but I think he heard it as you are wrong, you are wrong, you are wrong.
Right.
And it had gone from me being like, you're amazing to you are wrong. Prove
Yeah.
to me you're not wrong. At least that's what he heard.
Yeah.
And since that point, that has been our relationship. I think he views us as being Hollywood elite. We live in
Right.
California. And while as he has become even more a part of that community, because the rest of our family, the rest of our friends are not, it seems that like I remember just being like, I hope that I am the only one.
Mm.
I hope it's me because I also I
Right.
won't keep my mouth shut. Like if you say something about like my trans friends, I will say something.
Right.
Like
Yes.
and
Yes.
I've learned to pick my battles, but there are certain things that I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And so I think he does not. I think right now he thinks that we see him only as the worst in cops.
Right.
And I think and I'm pretty certain that everything he hates about possibly his job, everything that is attacking him is we are nothing but people who attack him.
Right.
I think, and I don't, and I got a middle brother who is a peacemaker, who
Mm.
I know like I know it tears him up,
Yeah.
but he knows that he stays out of the fucking fray.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think I don't believe there was ever a time that he ever saw me as a person
Mm.
because the age difference is so big.
Right.
And our relationship, at least from my point of view, has always been centering him. And so there's never been a question about what I do, like I
Yeah.
spent a decade in New York City and I'm a rich liberal who like and I'm just like, really? Because when I was working at that coffee shop and
Yeah.
felt like, it's the thing of like I have had a greater experience of by moving to New York City when I was 17,
Mm.
by being in LA, by traveling, being by interacting by force kind of, by
Mm.
interacting with many more people of many more socioeconomic backgrounds of different cultures and I
Yeah.
find that very my mom did too. I find that very interesting.
Definitely. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find it much more fascinating than where I grew up, which I love that I grew up in a very homogenized Midwest. Like I don't I but I also recognize what it is for what it is.
Yes.
Um and I don't and in comparison, if I were to say like, "Oh, you have a privileged upbringing," I will be yelled at
Yeah.
because there is no recognition of, "Oh, you were able to decide if you wanted to," like, it's stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
so it's I think I am the enemy. I think I
Mm.
am, and it's sad because at one point I was the champion, and now
Right.
I was a champion, and now I'm just the enemy. And
Yeah.
I don't believe that there's nuance in between them. I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that quite well. I understand that and it's difficult because in terms of reconciliation, like how do you
Yeah.
how
I don't
Y-
know. Like
yeah.
for me, I don't know because the thing about
Yeah.
it is in my recognizing like, oh yeah, like we had this thing that we do in my family where we fucking burn bridges and say terrible shit to each other.
Yeah.
And then come back and and my dad did the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
and the thing about it is for a while I was like, I'm just not going to do this. And this is how I'm just going to hold space. And I'd had a better handle on it. But I realized that from my perspective,
Mm.
because and this is again, from my perspective, I'm not saying I'm right and I'm not a victim in this because there are ways to circumvent it.
Yeah.
And to me, certain things I will not do, which
Mm.
is I will not say anything because I don't believe, I have been brought up in a family that believes that you love unconditionally, which is true. But I also have a dad, I also had a father who believed that you support somebody, even if their behavior, if you're enabling terrible at behavior. Like
Right.
you never correct anyone. You unequivocally back them up, even
Yeah.
if it's terrible, or even if it is offensive to other people in your life or you, or like it's,
Mm,
if you extrapolate it that way. So I
yeah.
think that I don't know that I don't know, at least in this circumstance, and I knew
Mm,
this because I blew it the fuck up this year. I blew it the fuck up over this. Like, I purposefully, and
yeah.
part of that was I had cancer.
Mm,
I had 3 different types of cancer. I had a sibling who literally, like, which, because what we do as actors, like, there's a commercial, and I was like, when I got cancer, I'm like, "Let's get in a cancer commercial."
yeah.
I remember I remember being interviewed. We were interviewed, and the interviewee was like, "Hey, were you really close? Did you, stand by her?" And the answer was, "I picked up the phone when she called." And it was about that time that, like, and I'm like, "Oh, that's right. I was going through chemo and I came to you. I did this and I
Mm,
came to you. I did." And that is also how our family works. My mom used to
right.
always go, and
Right.
I realized at one point that I was going to see my niece and nephew to spend time with them,
Mm,
and I could just feel that I was being tolerated. And the thing about having a lot of cancer and having a recurrence is you
mm,
realize you're on borrowed time and that there are a lot of people in the world who actually want to spend time with you.
yeah.
So rather than putting yourself in a position where someone is literally trying to trigger you and you're trying to just have a pleasant interaction,
Yeah.
why the fuck even bother?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of came to that, like, when I had a recurrence and literally that's, same, just didn't call me. Like, just
Mm,
didn't call, just didn't ask, just didn't, like, and I'm like, oh, you maybe care, but also you can't even act like, if I call you to see, you can't, like, you start to realize that conversations, you start to realize relationships, and this has happened in friendships too,
mm,
are, oh, I'm calling, and you're not going to ask it's all going to be about you all the
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, it's not that it needs to be about me.
Yeah.
But if there is no actual relationship here, and you realize there's never really been a relationship there,
Yeah.
then what are you fronting for? And if it's from a obligation because that's what you do for family, part of me
Yeah.
is like, yeah, fuck that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I get that. So I mean that because that's I again there's various shades of this that I can relate to very well. So for you then what when you have this kind of this difficult relationship with your family, like you know you move away, you move to New York, you're in LA, all that kind of stuff. What are you? How do you how do you deal with that separation that you have with them? Is it just all about that kind of the idea of just family isn't necessarily blood, and you find people that kind of fill that void, you kind of in your life, or
You do. I was really fortunate. So
mm,
I moved to New York again. My mom and I, like, my mom decided to divorce my father. She
mm,
gave us all the option of moving out with her. My brother stayed with my dad. I went with my mom.
mm,
My mom comes from a very, very big family.
mm,
Her father was one of 13,
mm.
and of his siblings, each of them had no less than 4 children. She had 125 first cousins.
Oh my god.
So, and I was remember and when I was growing up, she was very intent. She both was intent on everybody knowing, like, she grew up with her cousins, with us knowing our cousins. So I know my aunt and uncle. I
Mm,
had a human relate as opposed to seeing my grandmother as only my grandmother. Like, somewhere along the line, and I don't know what this is, I hung out with my grandparents as people rather
mm,
than just people like my grandparents.
yeah.
I know my aunts and uncles as people as opposed to just like these random people. And
Yeah.
I think that's part and parcel to my mother.
Mm,
Um, and she was also someone that everyone is welcome and everyone is family.
yeah.
And so family was not just blood, family was people, right?
Mm,
So when I moved to New York, that came into being. But it was kind of ingrained in me to come back for holidays. So I would come back every
mm,
year. Like, I would always come back for holidays.
right.
And if I can, I still do. My husband does too. Like, we kind of still do that. because my mom's also, like, taught us, like, "You have to be the one to show up," and so we have done that, and
Yeah.
I've done that with my extended family and my grandmother, who is my only living parent. She's 96. All
Wow.
my parents are dead. Like, my normal parents, like, it's a weird thing, like, she's the
Yeah.
one person. So but while my mother was alive, because she was also kinda like a best friend to me, like,
Mm.
she was my home, and so I always had family no matter where I went, and I never felt, far from them, like, because even though my dad and I had a fractured relationship, I was able to kind of figure it out again by not thinking of him as this guy who raised me, but realizing he was a 44-year-old dude at the time when they
Yeah.
got divorced, who had never really dated and now was dating again and had a big like and
Yeah.
and I had to come to that relationship in a different way and
Yeah.
still recognize that he was my father and sometimes he was great and sometimes he was not, because two things can be true at the same time. You can love
Yeah.
someone and also think they're an asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
But also I think it gave our relationship bigger depth. My mom the same way. So I've never felt fully estranged from my family. Like even like this situation with my brother, this is the most estranged I've been, but I have another
Mm.
brother who I call on the regular. Like, so
Mm.
it's never like, oh, you're my family isn't there. And especially with, the phone, like I'll pick up the phone and call my aunt and uncle. Like, and so which is weird to other people. They're like, I don't, I went to a Comic-Con and stayed with my cousin, and her husband is like, why do you guys hang out? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm lucky enough that I genuinely like,
Yeah.
as people, my cousins. Like, they're
That's
really
awesome.
cool fucking people. So
Yeah.
I lucked out in that way. I lucked out in that way.
I wonder that now. I'm curious how does your, because I know that definitely affects me, and I channel things through my art in sort of a therapeutic way at times. I'm wondering how does this sort of these family dynamics that you have, and the frustrations, and the joys as well. How do you channel that, or how does that influence you as an actor in any of your roles? Yeah.
I think there's an old adage that's like, you get the roles that are right for you.
Mm,
I think in certain respects, they also, for me, I've
yeah.
realized that the roles that I've gotten have come to me at a point in time, and there's a direct correlation to what I'm going through emotionally or what I'm trying to work through
Mm,
on the other side. Like it's and maybe it's just because you tend to make those connections. Like,
yeah.
my, in working with, and this is really specific, like most like in particular specifically with, Doom Patrol and like this character of
Right.
Hammerhead, that
Yeah.
everything was framed through this idea of the only way she knows how to deal with emotion is through the anger of it.
Yeah.
And anger is, and I remember talking to people, and I think part of the reason that this character who could have been so one note,
Yeah.
um, thanks to writers trusting me and allowing me to play with it, is that anger is a manifestation of fear, of,
Mm,
it's a
mhm.
manifestation of all these other things.
Yeah.
It's love misplaced. It's,
Mm,
it's fear of someone hurting you. It's all of these things. And I feel like that characters like that, like I've been playing because of my stature, I end up playing these characters that present to the world
mm,
as being really angry and like taking aggression out and like being someone, which if you were, if we wanted to say, traditionally female, if we were like, stereotypically, if we're talking gender binary, like,
right, right.
female attributes, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of specifically women who identify or have female attributes who are not comfortable with anger. That is not
Ah.
something I am uncomfortable with. And I think part of that is because of my
Yeah.
upbringing. And so to that point, the people that I've been able to, a lot of the roles in the last couple years have really been embodying people who are angry, but
Mm,
they're angry because they're hurt. And I feel like because I understand it,
yeah.
I can make it less, I can make it more about why, as opposed,
Mm,
or I can bring why to it,
yeah.
which adds dimension to a character that would just be like "Meh, meh," anger. And,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't get to see it because you're like, I mean, the Bex Dawson is just like, "Rah," you're just there to, Hulk smash stuff.
Right.
But I enjoy doing that because I think it's very easy to write off people
Mhm.
who interact in the world
Yeah.
purposefully, like kind of breaking things.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say that you get to excuse it, because
No,
again,
right.
you don't. But I think because of my upright, because of the people I've encountered, because of of my family life,
Mm.
my dad in particular, that is, that is the that is where that interacts.
Yeah.
In Star Trek, the same thing. Like
Mhm.
that idea of volcanism, like the Vulcan, my dad was very stoic and didn't like to show emotion, but he
Right.
felt a lot of shit and it would get out, which
Yeah.
is why Vulcans suppress, right? Part of my desire to add some Delton to Taveen,
Mm.
in addition to the head, is because my mother and my mother was like, if we like, my dad was Vulcan, like fiery Vulcan. My mom was Delton. Like, it was such an interesting exploration for me on a
Yeah.
much deeper level of, oh, these are how I hold these two sides of me,
Right.
because it's very much how I hold these sides of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And just think about it. The last time we spoke, and it was the day before, the goddamn day before the episode where Taveen meets her very untimely end.
I know,
A,
man.
you did really well not giving any sort of hints away. Because you're
Thanks.
like, oh, well, I was like, what do you want to do in the future with this character? Like, oh, Taveen and Jack can hang out and stuff.
Whatever.
And I'm
I
like,
mean,
cool. The
I still
next
have a
morning,
few.
you're dead. And I was like,
I
God
know.
damn it. So I'm curious though, because that was nuts. Obviously, you would have known that. I'm assuming going in, or pretty early on, that Taveen was going to meet that fate.
I did not know. I knew after we had shot episodes, like going into the next
You're like, I knew after they shot me.
No, I mean, I knew a little bit before that, a little bit before that.
Yeah.
It was a surprise, and it was, there was a lot of stuff going on, and my immediate reaction was, I mean, it was lovely.
Yeah.
Because I had, I actually found out I didn't have the scripts yet, because the way that they did, like, we had to close our deal before they gave us the scripts, and so I
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
read the script. And Terry was deep in, like, and I would see him on set, but he was deep in getting ready because he directed and wrote the
Yeah.
finales.
Yeah.
And so Deborah, the director, sent me an email last year on Thanksgiving, actually,
Yeah.
um, by accident. I think she was deep in like prep and didn't
Yeah.
realize what day I would read it. And it
Right.
was like, I've been watching your work and I love it so much. And so I was gutted when Taveen gets us, and I was like, what? And I was like, okay. There's a worry that can happen because it's Star Trek, and
Yeah.
you're not, Geordie's daughter. Like, you're not somebody who is, you're not quite a red shirt, but also I mean, we were given a lot more story or a lot more attention than one would,
Mm.
despite the fact that, most of my stuff is, technobabble.
Yeah.
Um, but also my first thought was, they hate me, I suck. That's why they're
Oh no.
um just because there was,
Yeah.
my second thought was like, that's ridiculous. And then I was like, okay, there's a reason, and I'll find out the reason. And I mean, you hope, because like, when I read they used to call me, I think I might have told you, they call me Taveen MZ. That's what Joseph used to call me, because I'd read the scripts and I'm like, I bet you Ashley, it's gonna, like, I would predict
Right.
it's gonna happen. And they're like, Taveen MZ. That, like, I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I love that.
and so, when you read the first script and it's like the next generation, I'm like, oh shit, we are setting this up for a spinoff. And so you're just like, I just need to make it to the end.
Yes.
But I'm also like, and then I saw Terry on set. He's like, well, it's the end, or maybe she is a twin sister. I don't, but you watch it because you also don't know, as an actor,
Mm.
how they're editing it together, right?
Right.
And so you're like, oh, they killed you because it mattered. Like they needed it to matter.
Yeah.
And then you can't argue with it.
Yeah.
You can't, I will always be, I have a husband who's a writer. I will always be someone, as much as I'm like, God damn it, but who's like, what is going to tell the best story? What is going to
Mm.
make the point?
Yeah.
Because I will be on that team, because right? TV is a writer's medium.
Yeah.
It's, we're part of that great cog and we help bring it together. But it's a collaborative effort, and it's driven by whoever the showrunner is. And, they had a hard time I think they didn't tell me because they weren't sure.
Yeah.
As they said, they're like, yeah, we weren't sure. Like, there's been long conversations about it. And then we talked, and then we joked, and it wasn't like, oh my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because I was like, they killed me there. I'm not dead in Doom Patrol, but like I had a series of just being,
Yes.
I'm like, and I'm dead, and I'm dead, and I'm dead.
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
it was nuts. It was
like,
nuts.
Yeah, part of me is like, I got to figure out if this is the hair I'm going with, because it's easy to be bald when you're going from job to job to job. Like now I have to think about it,
Yeah. Do you sort of wish, like, I don't want to be like uber critical. I really, as I've told everyone, I really enjoyed the series 3 of Picard. It is by far the best series of the 3 seasons. I know there's a lot of discourse out there, but I have strong opinions on the first 2 seasons.
Right.
But I think everyone did a really, really great job with season 3. And in fact, I bought it and I was watching a couple episodes the other night. But yeah, I did sort of wonder with maybe you and some of the other supporting cast, or rather the bridge staff, the bridge crew. There was a part of me, kind of every episode, that really was hungry for more of you guys. I mean, I loved great seeing the legacy characters, and obviously I understand giving the LaForge daughters their principal time because of their connection, and obviously Jack, I get that. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of wish there was just a little bit. I was hungry for more, and I wish we could have got that. I mean, I don't know if other people felt the same, or if it was just kind of the way it was, or
I think the response, like the fact that, I mean, once you're in Star Trek, you can go to, conventions, kind of like, but I think the fact that we've had such a wonderful response, especially like I've talked to Jin. I haven't talked to Joseph because he's blown up, because he also did Beef, and now he's like nominated for an Emmy, and like he's got, like, his world is like,
yeah.
But what I can say is, like, is I've had really in-depth conversations with people about this character, about Star Trek. When you consider, how much screen time I'm actually on, it's just like, wow. I give all credit to Terry. Like, and I think it's because, he wanted to thread that possibility, I think. I don't think I was wrong in that, when my first instinct was like, oh shit, we're driving towards a new series. But I also realized that, if you're going to bring the legacy characters back, you got to give them something to do. And you got, like, their expense, like, you have to pay them to come back, and you want them. And so there's just not time. Like, there's just not, unless we did a bunch of outtakes, like, there's just not time to start to investigate what that is,
Yeah.
And that's just a function of, what was that season supposed to be about? It's called Picard. It's not called Sabine. It's supposed to be about, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, and that's the other thing is, again, you could always come back. She could have a twin sister, or whatever. Who knows?
I mean, I gotta say, like,
Jeffrey Combs is like 50,000 characters in Star Trek, so you could still come back.
I mean, the amount of, like, part of me is like, really, did you have to vaporize me?
Right.
Like, could you just, like, because that makes it a little harder for Sabine to come back. But it is that thing of, like, I have had so many emails. Like, there are people who have written out full explanations on how you could basically pull the, stuff, like, search for Spock. Like, we could do that. Like, her, Kata jumped into, like, it, and I'm like, maybe, I don't know. I don't, like, but it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating and lovely that, like, literally a friend of ours who like has done spec scripts for the Star Trek, like wrote, he's like, this is how this can happen. This is how it can be explained.
Awesome.
Like, this is how we bring her back. And I'm like, great. I'll let Terry know.
Awesome.
I'm like, but Paramount needs to actually, say that they want to do it. So,
yes, yes.
I'm like, first things first, chicken or the egg, right? Like, money is first, right?
Yeah. I mean, is there? I mean, obviously, who knows? No one really knows, I guess, or everyone would know. But like, chances of spinoff, is it likely, unlikely? Is there actual talk going on, or is it just sort of?
I have heard nothing. I know nothing. Like, we all talk about how we would like to have it. I mean, and I'm like, there is no guarantee. Like, they killed me, but I'm still just like, I want to see this show. I want to see this show.
Yes.
So I'm all on board, with the whole Star Trek legacy of it all. But I'm like, and I'm like, and I'm like, there's no guarantee that like I'm coming back in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. But still, you'd be great if you did. What's interesting, is something you said earlier that I want to touch upon, because I also want to talk a little about the strikes that happened. There we go. Your camera came back.
I was like, but the words kept going, which was nice. I was like, oh.
Yeah, no, you paused. I just kind of let it go because I thought, well, I don't know what's going to happen anyway. Your camera's back and I can see it, so cool. I also kind of want to talk about the writer's strike and the actor's strike a little bit as well, because I think it kind of also ties in with a little bit of what you were saying earlier about kind of what you were saying about your siblings and their perception of you. And I was interested in. It was interesting watching the writer's strike and the actor's strike, and obviously I was very in favor for both of them because it made sense to me. And there was a lot of pop culture commentators who were very much not. They saw the strike as strikes as, well, why should they get more money, and not fully understanding the dynamics of it, or and there's complications because there's low-hanging fruit that you can kind of easily pick at and use as the example of why pay more money to people when this is what they're producing. Right. That's really easy. It's really easy to do that. Right. But then again, there's also so many more dynamics on that people don't understand. Like my aunt she wrote the film Tron. And
oh my God! That's so cool.
It's but her original idea and what that original conception was is nothing like what came out in the film, and she's actually she struggles with the actual film because it's so different to what she really wanted. Which, if in my old on in the Luke Deckard show Archives, there's an interview with her. We talk about it, and it's fascinating because so it's there's these things where it's like it's so easy to blame written by, right? When we really need to be looking at. I mean, I think. It's going to maybe a bit cheap shot me, but I think The Marvels is a good example of a film that has tanked miserably and not done very well. That has nothing to do with the director or the actors, and everything to do with the producer. Right. Because it's like you need to follow the money, guys. It's like Blade Runner. I'm a big fan of the movie Blade Runner, but that original cut of Blade Runner sucks, and it sucks because uncreative producers are forcing their opinion on something and making people do things that suck. So I'm curious about with kind of like going back to the idea of perception. What was it like, going through both of these strikes? Because the actors were there in solidarity for the writers, which is great, and then it's was reciprocated. Kind of juggling that perception and kind of, I'm assuming you guys were probably hearing and or seeing both the positives and the negatives. What was that balancing?
We don't need you.
Like what was it like kind of balancing that?
I think the biggest part of that is in recognizing when my colleagues would get upset about people's opinions. And I kept trying to frame it in ways that that people who don't work in our industry could understand. Because the thing that people forget is we're really good. Our entire job is to hide how the sausage is made. Because if you see how the sausage is made, it can be less magical. And we're all about magic and spectacle.
Magic, yes.
And like, it arrives fully crafted. Now, to your point, I haven't seen the Marvels yet, but I intend to. But there is the thing that what people don't understand is that you can you can't make a good movie out of a bad script, but you can take a really good script and make a really terrible fucking movie.
Yes.
And sometimes it is not like, it has nothing to do like sometimes the script is great and the writing is great and the direct, but also for all of it to come together is really hard. I think, people don't understand how hard it is to actually get something made, first of all. There's also a good friend of ours who's a screenwriter she expressed, what did she say? I don't even know if it's her quote, but I love it every so often, is people like to confuse typing with writing.
I love that.
Because, and that's what tends to, like, as you get up, that is where things have started to happen. Because also, yes, if you look at these negotiations, of all of the studio heads, the only person who's actually worked in our industry is Bob Iger. Bob Iger has worked his way up, and we can argue about but when we're going to the table and we're trying to talk about production, and we're talking to David Zaslav, who's been in the industry mostly on reality television, and that is a different animal. You cannot take a reality budget. And I mean, and trying to do Doom Patrol. No. I mean, there were a lot of cuts that happened when, Discovery bought HBO Max. There was a delay, and it was felt, including myself, it was crowded across the board, because you go through and people are trying to, when you are a CEO, you are all about the bottom line. And also you're only thinking quarterly, right? One of my brothers used to work for Firestone, and everybody who worked at Firestone, like the store managers, used to get, and this is what I used to tell people who aren't in our industry, but I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. Like, my brother used to work for Firestone. He was a store manager, and they used to get bonuses based on service, like actual service, how much they sold. And at one point, a guy came in who had come from like Best Buy, didn't know automotive, but changed the bonus structure and said, hey, your bonuses are now going to be on however many credit cards you sell, however many credit cards you push. And so and I'm like, and to that point, I'm like, if you take that for actors, so if you take that model and you take like residuals, which is what we're talking about, so let's say you're a guy and you're selling credit cards, and you're selling credit cards, you get a bonus every time. If you're selling credit cards and somebody refers their entire office in the old model, if you sold that and then you got everybody else in the office, you would get a commission on every single person. The way streaming works is you sold the one person in the office. Now you're going to get this entire thing, but instead of giving every single one, we'll give you 3. Even though you get these views. And so I started, when I was talking, not necessarily online, but to other people, trying to explain that's how it works, but also to explain that, yes, we don't work. I've had a really good run, but I've been on 3 shows, like I recur, I worked a total, if you put it all together, on Star Trek, on Picard, I worked 4 or 5 weeks. Spread out over 6 months, but 5 weeks, right? On Doom Patrol, I would work, if I'm in 8 episodes, I've worked maybe 8 weeks. And while I understand people are like, well, why should you get paid if you're not there? And I'm like, because you have to. I had an acting teacher tell us once, the reason you get paid as much as you do is you don't work enough. You don't work enough. So you need to have money to be able to do it. Otherwise, you're going to do something else. He's like, because why stick around? If I can go, and I've done this, I teach at the gym, and I've been there long enough that I make a good rate. If someone's offering me a job on a short film and I'm going to lose money, I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? And so And so it is that thing of, if you want your actors to be good at what they do, if you want your writers to be good at what they do, if you want better quality product,
Mm.
you gotta give them the space to get better at it.
Yeah.
And if what you're
Yeah.
doing is they're not getting paid enough, it's like, it's that, master jack of all trades, master of none. If I'm trying to, like, I'm trying to work and write a script, and I'm driving Uber, and I'm doing, like,
Yes.
I want all of my attention on this
Yeah.
one thing, because that makes it better,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Definitely.
And it's hard to, but it's also, people are gonna hear it or they're gonna not. I think the best thing
Yeah.
that came out of it was really the solidarity you saw in the unions,
Mm.
and also WGA leading us, and specifically Teamsters,
Yeah.
to start standing up for other unions.
Yes.
Because there is
Yes.
that thing of,
Yeah.
as goes Hollywood, so goes the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And I think to a degree, it's like, those rich bastards are doing this. We should stand, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, there's things that I saw recently within just the publishing industry that I think well, I don't think I did. I tweeted about it. There was a someone who works for a publishing company tweeted that they were looking for, it was like a writing opportunity. Like, we want someone to apply for this job of writing this book that has X, Y, and Z in it.
right.
And I crumbled inside because I just thought, where's the originality? You're publishing. You're meant to be looking for new voices. You're meant to be looking for original. Meant
Yeah.
to, and not looking for fucking puppets.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I get really frustrated with the publishing industry because I'm just like, guys, gals, everyone, whatever. We all have so much power as the artists, as the creators, and
Yeah.
we still let these stupid publishing houses control everything
Yeah.
because we're so afraid to say something
Yeah.
because they might not let us into the stupid clubhouse. All
Yeah.
the while not thinking about the fact that, but even like the music industry, we don't need record labels anymore. We don't need publishing houses anymore. People
Yeah.
can, not everyone, but it's much easier to go independently now. It's much easier to produce an independent novel or album than it
Oh,
is to
yeah.
produce an independent movie, obviously, you
Yeah.
know? And it's
Yeah.
like, so seeing the solidarity, I was just like, I really wish, the Society of Authors and other author sort of groups and unions would also start to hopefully learn something from that solidarity, and also that ability to kind of start seriously pushing back
Yeah.
at the big the big trousers in charge.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I feel like, you see what ends up happening is, I mean, you get people who get into, these positions of power as executives.
yeah,
And the thing about it is they're trying to keep their job.
yeah,
Like, even working
yeah,
in a writer's room, like my husband he's been in a couple writers' rooms, but he got fired from a writer's room because he thought his job
mm,
was to help make the best possible show.
mm,
And at the time, it was not, because there were newer showrunners. Like, everything is about ego, and
right,
it's
yeah,
you will, like, people will fail up, but people who understand how to make other people feel seen-ish,
mm,
like, and then negotiate their way around to work within that system. And it's because it's like, people have such fragile egos
yes,
that they don't want to lose their job. They don't want someone to take over from them. And it's kind of crazy to me. Like, I'm like, if
yes,
someone does something well, fucking amplify it.
right,
It, I that would be, but again, then what happens? Then are you obsolete? Like,
yeah,
it's such a game, and especially things like this where you're like, okay, we want them to write this, and this, and you're like, what's out in the book market? It costs this much to do it, so we are gonna hedge our bets.
yeah,
It's like, if it's like playing roulette. You know,
yeah,
basically, we used to have studios. We used to have, because they were about being creative. They used to bet on numbers, and
yeah,
they would bet on the line. And now, for the most part, they bet on red and black.
yeah,
You know what I
yes,
mean? And so the payout is, you can, but every so often, you get somebody who can, but a lot of times, like, even, look at the Barbie movie, it was, but it's just, they just want, even making an independent film.
mm,
You get an independent film, and they go through their roles of, if you're going to get financing, CAA has because my husband shot his first feature in 2017,
Mm.
like $1 million, like, but that's
Yeah.
pretty substantial, you know.
Yeah.
But when they were choosing, even though you have an idea of who it could be,
Mhm.
if you've got money, you have to go. The financiers will tell you.
Mm.
CAA has a book, and it tells you who sells overseas, who will open a movie. Like there
Right.
are numbers by their names.
Right. Right.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest, to be
Yeah.
fair. But
You know?
it's like gone are the days of sort of maybe they'll return. I hope they will return. But gone are the days of the new Star Wars. You know,
Yeah.
And yeah, I long for that. I long
Yeah.
for that
Or
new
it's
stuff.
or it's starting, provided they're not stealing all of our data. Like, but also you start to see new voices because it is, it also crowds stuff because anybody can
Mm.
make anything. But your social media, you're doing stuff on social media. It's
Yeah.
like, I have a friend writing a book about he basically had, he wrote this incredible book
Mm.
about dying because he found out he had a hereditary disease they didn't know, and everything started shutting down. And but publishers are going to tell you
Yeah.
need to go out and build your audience first, and then he will give you money. It's like there's a guy who used to be a fitness writer, who wrote, shit went down. How shit went down. He's a history writer now, and James
Right.
Fell. James Fell self-published something that he just swears and tells the story of history every day,
Right.
and sold that shit online, like published it himself.
Mm.
And then a publisher came out and like backed up a truck to give him money.
Yeah.
But it's like being an actor, like getting an agent is you get an agent once you can. It's such a catch-22. If I get it's like I can prove I can work, and now someone will come on. Now
Yes.
now that someone has taken a chance on me, an agent will come. Like it's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's nutty. It's nutty. But unfortunately we have to wrap up now.
Yeah.
But I always love talking to you, Steph. It's
Oh,
always
same.
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on. Where can people find you online?
I am on the InstaWebs. Instagram's at ski says. That is my handle also on the X app, although I'm not as active there,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm exploring the thread. There's so many that I'm
I
just like,
know.
Instagram right now is the easiest place because I'm just
Yeah,
like,
it's
it's
true.
it's pictures. How many fights can you get in over pictures? I mean, you can get
Right.
in a lot, but like
It can happen. It can happen. And what are you working on at the moment? Is there anything you want to plug?
honestly, well, I am attempting to get the bravery, I guess bravery to there's a book called I Am Herod,
Mm.
that we optioned, that my husband wrote a feature for, that is kind of a very light, it's kind of a faith-based book, faith-based project without
Mm.
being overly faithy.
Right.
That I am like, well, I'm going to try and produce this. And
Cool.
so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. It's kind of new territory because I'm like, I know how to do things, but I'm also like, do I just call these people? Like, I don't know. Because it's always like, well, if you have money, it's easy. If you're like, I got, $1 million, I can be like, hey, I got $1 million. Want to be my film?
Right.
It's another thing when you're like, hey, we want to raise the money or we want to get people interested. Would you be interested in being in my film?
Well, good luck with that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fingers crossed that you can get some funding, and because that sounds like fun. I the name sounds familiar. I'll have to look it up though. It doesn't.
Basically, like kind of the elevator speeches. It's a guy who is is having kind of a midlife crisis and also
Yeah.
kind of and it's a true story. A guy in Canada who basically like is kind of having a midlife and a little bit of a spiritual crisis maybe.
Yeah.
And basically ends up going and participating in a passion play called I Am Herod in Drumheller, Alberta, with a bunch of believers, but he's not. And so it's an exploration of like, what is faith? What
Right.
does faith need to mean? And I
Yeah.
just feel like the idea of religion has been so used as a battering ram, and a lot of
Yes.
time. But I also know a lot of people of faith, whatever
Mm.
that means to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
that feel like they can't come out because of that.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
just I like
Yeah.
and I think that sometimes just the idea of God or whatever isn't necessarily an organized thing. I think it's people. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the message of the, is kind of the message of the book. So
yeah, I love that. I love the sound of that. That is a fascinating thing, and I could God damn it, I could keep going on that topic, but
yeah,
I will hold off. I
yeah.
will hold off. I will hold off. But yeah, this was a ton of fun. Crack on with the movie you're making. We'll bring you back on and we'll talk about that in the future. That would be
Excellent.
that would be a lot of fun. So yeah, again, thanks for coming on, everyone. Thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll see you soon, and I'll see everyone next week for whatever.
The Secret Circle.